Nothing pop and puss, y'all. So we are back and I need you to sit with me for a second, because what I am about to walk you through is not the story you thought you were watching. The pawn shop receipt everybody dragged Papoose over, Aubrey, Papoose, Mackie, Remy Ma's estranged husband. That receipt is not the scandal. That receipt is the exit sign. That receipt is the map. And I am telling you right now, Claressa Shields, the two-time Olympic gold medalist boxer who just signed an $8 million deal with Salida Promotions and Win Records with this same man attached as creative director, Claressa, if you are watching. You better take out a notepad, because the reason the jewelry left that house on November 6th, 2024 is the exact same reason your bag is going to look funny in about 18 months if you do not pay attention right now. Everybody has been laughing at the nickname Pawn Puss. Everybody has been dragging the receipts. And while y'all been laughing, nobody stopped to ask the real question. Why that day? Why that jewelry? Why the police report? Why the insurance angle? And why the man who has spent 15 years calling himself the $1.5 million man had to sneak into a Manhattan pawn shop like a common corner hustler to fund a birthday? Because when you line the dates up, when you line the deals up, when you line the divorce filing up, when you line the $8 million Win Records paperwork up, you are not looking at a marriage that fell apart. You are looking at a business model. A business model where the wife is the ATM, the daughter is the front-facing brand, the new girlfriend is the next revenue stream, and the man in the middle has never actually earned a check that did not have somebody else's name on the top of it. And when we get to the part about why this divorce still is not signed in 2026, and I promise you we are getting there, section by section, receipt by receipt, you are going to understand that the pawn shop was never the crime. The pawn shop was the cover-up. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me set the whole board for you, because if you just walked in off the street you might think this is a messy divorce story and nothing more. It is not. Reminisce. Remy Ma, Smith, and Papoose have been publicly married since 2008. They wed while she was serving her prison sentence, and for the better part of 2 decades they sold the culture what was arguably the most marketed, black love, narrative in mainstream hip-hop. He wrote the poems. He held the microphone. He did the interviews. He built an entire brand identity out of being the ride-or-die husband who held her down while she was locked up. And the culture ate it. We ate it with a fork and a spoon. We put them on magazines. We put them on reality TV. We put them on Love and hip-hop as the couple that proved rap marriages could work. Then in May of 2025, the entire thing collapsed. Papoose filed for divorce on May 22, 2025, publicly claimed Remy had cheated on him numerous times, and tried to get out ahead of the narrative. Remy came right back and said, no, actually, let's talk about who is doing what to who, and let's talk about the woman who has been very publicly around my husband, Claressa Shields, the greatest female boxer of her generation. Undisputed champion in multiple weight classes, a woman who is 1 year older than Papoose's own daughter, Chanel. And once Remy started dropping receipts, everything changed. Because the receipts were not about infidelity. The receipts were about money. The receipts were about a man who manages his wife's career, takes 20% off her checks, does not pay the household bills, and then when the well starts drying up because the marriage is on the rocks, allegedly walks into a pawn shop with her Cartier jewelry, signs his own name on the ticket, and walks out with cash. The stakes here are not gossip. The stakes here are that a woman worth an estimated multi-million-dollar catalog spent nearly 2 decades funding a man who was building a reputation off her name and, when that name became inconvenient, allegedly liquidated her property to keep his image alive. And the biggest stake of all, the one nobody wants to say out loud, is that this exact business model is now being installed, brick by brick, around Claressa Shields and her brand new $8 million deal. So the question is not whether Papoose pawned the jewelry. Remy showed us the ticket. The question is why that specific ticket on that specific day tells us everything we need to know about what is coming for the next woman in the chair. Let's get into the evidence. Layer 1, surface evidence, the stuff you can see with your own 2 eyes, and the first piece is the receipt itself. Remy Ma posted a pawn shop receipt to her Instagram in May of 2025, and on that receipt the item is Cartier jewelry, the signer is Papoose, and the date at the top, the date everybody keeps skipping over, is November 6th, 2024. Now hold that date in your head like a stone, because we're going to come back to it 3 separate times before this video is over. The receipt was not from May. The receipt was not from around the divorce filing. The receipt was from 6 months earlier. which means when Papoose was still publicly playing the loving husband, still doing the we good interviews, still smiling in the pictures, that jewelry had already been sitting in a pawn shop for half a year. That is piece number 1, and it is already devastating. Piece number 2 is Remy's own video statement, where she explains, and this part is critical, that she had to get the police involved because the jewelry was insured. The insurance is the reason the police got called. That is not a bitter wife move. That is not a spite post. That is a legal necessity. If your jewelry is insured and it goes missing from your home, the insurance company requires a police report. Which means the moment Papoose signed that ticket, he did not just create marital drama. He allegedly created a paper trail that a civil claims adjuster and a detective are both going to want to talk to him about. Piece number 3 is Remy on camera saying, and I quote the sentiment, "Why is my jewelry not in my jewelry box?" And it left out of here the last time he was here. She is putting the timeline together in real time on Instagram Live, and she is saying this man came to my house, this man had access to my jewelry box, this man is the last person who was there before the jewelry disappeared. And now here is a receipt with his signature on it. That is not speculation. That is a woman methodically walking her audience through a chain of custody. Piece number 4 is the financial ecosystem she is described in these same clips, 20% of her checks going to him as her manager, her paying all the household bills anyway, him claiming a ceremonial position at Win Records that has been reported to be commission only with no salary, and him not wanting to sign the divorce paperwork despite being the one who publicly announced he had filed. Piece number 5, and this one is the one that hurts, is the Nigeria Auntie situation. Claressa Shields' former close friend Nigeria coming out and alluding publicly to Papoose allegedly pawning high-end purses that belonged to Claressa. Same alleged pattern. Different woman. Same alleged pawn behavior. That is not one bad night. That is a repeating behavior showing up around 2 different women in 2 different phases of this man's life. And piece number 6, the one that turns this from a personal drama into a cultural moment, Papoose'S public counterclaim that he actually wrote 90% of Remy Ma's raps, including Conceited. Think about the tell in that statement. When his access to her jewelry gets exposed, his first defense is not to deny the pawn ticket. His first defense is to try to claim ownership of the very art that made her career possible in the first place. That is the tell. That is the psychology. This is a man who, when cornered, does not defend his own actions. He tries to retroactively erase the woman whose bag he has been eating off. 6 pieces of surface evidence, all pointing in the same direction, all publicly verifiable, all sitting on the internet right now, and we have not even reached the layer where it gets serious. And oh, do I have more? Because if you thought the pawn shop receipt was the ceiling, baby, we have not even reached the 2nd floor yet. The next section is the part that is going to make Claressa Shields' management team pick up the phone, because what I am about to walk you through is the pattern the culture has been sleeping on for 15 years. The Blue Heart Gang has been asking me for weeks to connect the dots between Papoose, the Win Records deal, and why this divorce still is not finalized in the summer of 2026, and I told y'all I was going to get to it, and today is the day. So if you are one of Pap's remaining defenders in the comments, and I know a few of you are still down there in the trenches for this man, I need you to buckle up, because what is coming next is not opinion. What is coming next is a receipt-driven walk through the exact reason Remy stopped signing the checks. Stay with me. Layer 2, cultural evidence, the insider stuff, the stuff you have to actually be paying attention to the community to catch. The first piece is the reaction from Nigeria, Claressa's former best friend I mentioned earlier, a woman who was in the room, a woman who watched the relationship form, and who is now publicly alluding to alleged pawning behavior with Claressa's high-end purses. When somebody's own inner circle starts leaking the same pattern that just got exposed in a divorce, that is not coincidence. That is the culture warning you in real time. The second piece of cultural evidence is Papoose'S own daughter, Chanel, sometimes referenced by fans as Deja Mackey, publicly calling Claressa Shields her stepmother. Publicly. On social media. Doing her makeup with her. Advertising her products with her. And I need everybody to sit with what that actually means for a second, because Chanel is 1 year younger than Claressa. 1 year. Claressa Shields cannot be anybody's stepmother in any meaningful, developmental, spiritual, or life experience sense to a woman who is essentially her same age. What that public stepmother branding actually is, and I want to be careful here because this is my analysis, is a soft launch of Claressa into the family brand ecosystem that Papoose built off of Remy. Same play. New actress. Third piece, Claressa Shields herself has publicly broken silence on the relationship, going on the record to Bet and elsewhere to defend Papoose's, insisting he is happy, secure, and deeply in love, and telling the internet that she is never going to stay quiet about their union. That is a woman who is emotionally locked in. And I say that with compassion, because we have all been that woman. But an emotionally locked-in woman who just signed an $8 million deal that has her partner installed as creative director of the label side is not in a defensive posture. She is in a vulnerable posture. Fourth piece, Claressa and Papoose's have done joint interviews openly talking about starting a family together, while Remy Ma is on the internet weekly reminding everybody that this man is still legally her husband and the divorce has not been finalized. That is a cultural fact, not a theory. As of the reporting available through late 2025 and into 2026, the divorce filed in May of 2025 remained in limbo, with Remy repeatedly explaining on Instagram Live that she is waiting on it to be finalized and that Papoose's has been the party dragging his feet on completing the paperwork. Fifth piece of cultural evidence, and this is the one that made the Vibers really sit up, the way Remy has slowly, over multiple live streams, walked her audience out of the "he held me down" narrative and into the truth of who was actually funding what. She did it patiently. She did it with clips. She did it with receipts. She did not come out swinging with a hit piece. She let the culture arrive at the conclusion by itself, and the culture did. Every single comment section that used to be full of black love hearts under their old photos is now full of Papoose's jokes and side-eye emojis. That is a cultural shift you can measure. Sixth piece, and I want to be fair here, some of Papoose's remaining defenders have argued that he genuinely contributed to Remy's pen, pointing to his own claim that he wrote 90% of her raps as evidence that he was a legitimate creative partner and not just a leech. I hear that argument. I have heard it in the comments. And here is why it does not hold. If you were the actual architect of a woman's catalog, you would not need to announce that publicly for the first time only after she starts exposing your financial behavior. You would have been credited on the songs. You would have been in the publishing splits. You would have been on the writer's block on ASCAP and BMI where anybody with an internet connection could look it up. The fact that this claim only appeared as a defense mechanism in the middle of a public unraveling is not proof of creative partnership. It is proof of a man trying to retroactively claim credit for a legacy he could not build on his own. And that pattern, trying to attach himself to a successful woman's brand after the fact, is the exact pattern we are about to see playing out with Claressa Shields, and it is why this next section is the one that matters most. Because now we have to stop talking about the marriage. Now we have to talk about the machine. Now let me hit the gear shift, because up to this point we have been in gossip territory, and I want to leave gossip territory right now. What I am about to walk you through is not about who cheated and who did not. What I am about to walk you through is the structural, industry-level analysis of what Papoose's has actually been doing for the last 15 years, because when you understand the machine, the pawn shop receipt stops looking like a scandal and starts looking like the natural output of a business model that was engineered from day one to extract value from famous women without generating any independent value of its own. And I am going to break this down across 3 separate systemic angles, and every single one of them connects back to Claressa Shields' new $8 million deal. And every single one of them explains why the divorce has been sitting in legal limbo for over a year. Systemic angle number 1 is the manager position. In this industry, being an artist's manager while also being married to that artist is a well-documented conflict of interest that almost every legitimate legal advisor in the business will tell an artist to avoid. The reason is simple. The manager gets paid a percentage off the top, before household expenses, before taxes, before anything. Which means if you are married to your manager, your household is effectively being taxed twice by the same person. Remy has said on multiple lives that Papoose's was pulling 20% off her checks while she was still paying all the bills. That is not a marriage. That is a labor arrangement dressed in a wedding ring. And critically, when the marriage ends, that manager position does not automatically end with it, because the management contract is a separate legal document from the marriage certificate. Which, and pay attention here, is one of the credible reasons a manager husband might drag his feet on finalizing a divorce. Because the longer the divorce takes, the longer the management commission structure can potentially remain in play or be leveraged in the settlement. That is not a theory I invented. That is how these situations have historically played out across the entertainment industry, and if you look at the reporting on how long this divorce has been sitting since the May 2025 filing, the timeline lines up with that pattern. Systemic angle number 2, and this is the one Claressa Shields' team needs to circle in red, the win record structure. The publicly reported $8 million deal Claressa signed for a minimum of 4 fights, brokered through Solita Promotions with a Win Records partnership, has Papoose'S installed as creative director. That is a title. That is a paid position, or in some reporting a commission-based position, that is derivative of Claressa's actual earning power. Papoose's is not the fighter. Papoose's is not the promoter. Papoose's is not the network. Papoose's is a title attached to a deal that was made possible by Claressa's own decades of work in the ring, an Olympic gold in 2012, an Olympic gold in 2016, undisputed championships across multiple weight divisions. The largest contract in women's boxing history announced in late 2025 ahead of her 2026 return. That deal exists because of her, not because of him. And yet the structure of the arrangement means a percentage of the machine attached to her career flows through a label he is positioned inside. That is the exact same architecture as the Remy Ma manager arrangement. Different industry. Same skeleton. Systemic angle number 3, and this is the meta point that ties the whole thing together, the media narrative capture. For 15 years, the hip-hop press treated Papoose's and Remy as the black love success story of the culture, and that narrative capture was not accidental. It was cultivated. Interview after interview, photo op after photo op, reality TV appearance after reality TV appearance. The story was carefully framed as him holding her down, him being the loyal one, him being the provider figure. When the actual financial reality, as Remy is now walking us through in real time, was the exact opposite. The reason that narrative capture matters is because it protected him for over a decade from anybody looking too closely at the pawn shop adjacent behavior. The "he don't have a real job" whispers, the "why is the manager the husband?" side conversations that were happening in industry circles for years, but never made it to the front page. And now, in 2026, we are watching that same narrative machinery start to warm up around Claressa, the joint interviews about starting a family, the "he loves me so much" statements to the press, the daughter publicly calling her stepmother. And it is the exact same brand assembly line that got built around Remy back in the late 2000s. Which means, and here is the industry point Claressa's people need to hear, if the media narrative is being pre-built around the relationship rather than around Claressa's actual boxing legacy, then when the relationship inevitably has the same crisis every relationship of this shape has had, the narrative fallout will hit her earning power the same way it is currently hitting Remy's piece. The machine does not care whose bag it is eating. The machine just eats. Which brings me to what I promised you at the top, the truth bomb, the reveal, the reason we are actually here. Because when you take that November 6th, 2024 date on the pawn shop receipt and you overlay it on the timeline of what was actually happening around Papoose's that fall, the strained marriage, the reported inability to access Remy's money, the eventual filing for divorce 6 months later in May of 2025, and the eventual public emergence of the Claressa Shields relationship, what you are looking at is not a husband stealing from his wife for a birthday. What you are looking at, allegedly, is a man who realized his primary revenue stream was about to be cut off, and who allegedly began liquidating the physical assets in the household to fund the transition period between one bag and the next. That is the real reason the jewelry left that house. It was not entitlement for the daughter. It was not a gambling debt in isolation. It was, allegedly, bridge financing. Bridge financing between the Remy Ma era and the Claressa Shields era. And I want you to sit with what that actually means, because that is not a marital dispute. That is, allegedly, the behavior of a man treating his own marriage like a business he is about to sell off, and treating his wife's insured jewelry like inventory he could quietly move to cover expenses while he waited for the next deal to close. And the next deal did close. In late 2025, that Win Records and Solita Promotions partnership put $8 million on the table for Claressa, with Papoose'S installed as creative director. 6 months after the pawn shop date. Roughly 6 months after the divorce filing. The math on this timeline is not something I am making up. The math on this timeline is public. And the reason Remy involved the police, the reason she made sure the insurance company had a paper trail, the reason she posted the receipt herself instead of letting it sit quietly, is because she understood, correctly, that the pawn shop ticket was not just evidence of a bad marriage. It was evidence of a pattern. It was evidence of a man who, when the money he was writing got uncomfortable, allegedly did not go get a job, did not go get a real deal, did not go build his own catalog. He allegedly went and monetized his wife's property. And once you see that pattern once, you cannot unsee it in the next arrangement. The Nigeria allegations about the purses. The daughter fronting the stepmother, branding to insert Claressa into the family ecosystem. The creative director title on a deal he did nothing to earn in the ring. All of it is the same play, and the pawn shop receipt from November 6, 2024 is the Rosetta Stone that translates every other move he has made since. This is the truth Remy Ma has been slow-walking her audience toward for over a year, and this is the truth Claressa Shields, respectfully, cannot afford to keep dismissing. Because a man who allegedly liquidates one woman's assets in the transition period is a man whose behavior around the next woman's assets deserves, at minimum, a very good lawyer, a very good accountant, and a very hard look at every single line of that $8 million contract. And here is the part where the hero rises, because through all of this, through the divorce, through the exposure, through the pawn shop mess, through the manager-husband nonsense, through the 15-year narrative capture, Remy Ma is still standing. She is still working. She is still writing. She is still on the mic. She is still the same Remy Smith who came home from prison and rebuilt a career from nothing, and she is doing it right now without a manager husband taking 20% off the top, without a creative director attached to her deals, without a partner who allegedly views her jewelry box as a personal ATM. She is the reason the culture even knows the truth of what this business model looks like, because she is the one who did the work of exposing it publicly instead of quietly signing NDAs and pretending nothing happened. And what Remy has done for the culture in the last year and a half is something the culture has not really thanked her for yet, so let me do it here. She showed us the machine. She showed us the receipts. She showed us the exact way a certain type of man attaches himself to a successful woman's career and monetizes it from the inside. She showed us the 20%. She showed us the pawn ticket. She showed us the police report angle. She showed us the he don't want to sign limbo game. She showed us all of it, and she did it while still being professional, still being a mother, still being an artist, still being the same person she has always been. One man makes headlines by allegedly liquidating jewelry he did not earn. The other person, the actual artist in that marriage, makes headlines by continuing to produce, continuing to speak truthfully, and continuing to protect the next woman coming down the pipeline whether that woman knows it or not. That is the contrast. That is the story. And that is why, no matter how this divorce eventually closes, Remy Ma has already won the only fight that mattered, the fight for the truth of who was actually the bag holder in that marriage. She won that fight the day she posted the receipt. Everything after that is just paperwork. And this is only the start, because there are two very specific things coming down the pipeline that you need to be subscribed for. Number 1, the finalization of this divorce, and the reason it has been sitting in limbo, because I have been sitting on the specific legal and financial reason Papoose'S has been slow-walking the paperwork. And I am going to walk the Blue Heart Gang through that piece by piece in the next upload. So if you want the full breakdown of why the signature has not landed on that final decree yet, you have got to be right here when it drops. Number 2, the Claressa Shields $8 million contract structure and what specifically inside that Win Records and Salida Promotions arrangement Claressa's team should be renegotiating right now if they are watching this, because the deal announcement made the news. But the deal terms have not been fully broken down by anybody in the culture yet, and I am going to be the one to do it. So drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe so you do not miss it, and while you are here, go ahead and click the next video where I am walking you through the specific reason Chanel Mackie publicly called Claressa Shields her stepmother. Because there is a very specific brand deal that was announced within 30 days of that post, and once you see the timing, you are going to understand that the stepmother branding was not a family moment, it was a business move, and I have got the receipts on that one too. Stay with me. It's your girl, and the vibers are just getting started.